So, welcome to another edition of HBCU Sports. I'm Kendrick Marshall, and I got my tag team partner with me tonight, Jarrett Hoffman. Instead of a three-man weave, we're going to be doing it a double team tonight with no Chris Stevens and no Karen Rashad, but we're going to have a good show nonetheless. Tonight it's going to be all about basketball, one of the rare shows we've done since we started this podcast, where there's no football news at all to talk about. Um, Jared Hoffman, he went down to the CIAA tournament in Baltimore, Maryland, to be our correspondent and cover for us. He did a phenomenal job providing updates of all the games. He did a wonderful preview before the tournament started, and he even provided a recap of the tournament that's available right now on our YouTube page. Jared, what were your impressions of Baltimore, of the tournament in general?
Well, Baltimore is what you would expect. For those who don't know, I'm from Maryland, but I'm from the part that's closer to DC than Baltimore. So they kind of like are cousins. They don't really claim Maryland. They Baltimore might as well be its own state. So, but I think Baltimore, what makes them so great as the host of the CIAA tournament is that they embrace it. Like you go around the city and you see banners everywhere along the strip leading to Royal Farms Arena. Well, it's now called CFG Bank Arena, but Royal Farms Arena as we know it, there's just branding everywhere, and you see just hundreds of people walking down the street wearing their paraphernalia, and you see the buses along the side, and it's just a tremendous atmosphere. And that there's nothing like being inside that arena when the bands are going, when the fans are going, when the game is reaching the fever pitch, and it's just nothing like it. And the CIAA tournament has an atmosphere that I don't believe you get at most basketball tournaments. It's an event every single year, whether it was in Baltimore, whether it was in Charlotte. It's going to be fun no matter where it is. But it's great that Baltimore has been such a gracious host and has been such a involved. It gotten such involvement from its community leaders. You see the mayor Brandon Scott has is there. You get see the Maryland governor Wes Moore is there. You see all of these celebrities pulling up. You see Fab pulling up, Fabulous for those like Fab. You had Fab pulling up. You had you know uh what's this uh the DJ. I'm I'm blanking on his name, but then like all these influential figures that pull up to this tournament because they know the history of it. They know what kind of environment it is, and this year was no different. And I'm blessed to say that I was there to witness it live.
Yeah, the CIAA tournament is always a standout event. This time during basketball season, for a long time it was in Charlotte, and people raved about how good it was there. Not just the basketball, but some of the events around the CIAA tournament. And it seems like Baltimore, in the second year hosting it, has really lived up to the billing of continuing this tradition of making the CIAA tournament an event in itself. But aside from that, Jared, how was the basketball? We had a couple champions. One on the women's side, one on the men's side. The men's side, Lincoln University won their first ever CIAA tournament championship. And on the women's side, Fayetteville State, they won the championship again out of the women's bracket. So, Jared, what kind of impressed you most? You start with the men and the women's bracket first, but what kind of impressed you most watching the full week of basketball that you
Well, first of all, to redeem myself, it was Fat Man Scoop who I was thinking of. Could not remember his name for nothing. I don't know why I just went blank. But the women's bracket, I'll start with the women's bracket. It is a loaded field. There was one who was above everyone. It was uh, Fayetteville State in the field, but just so y'all can see the field down here, Fayetteville State up here. But let me tell you something. That field was very impressive. You had Claflin, who had their first winning season in since they entered the CIAA. You had Virginia State, who, if you watch my CIAA tournament recap, they had a 10-game improvement over their record last season. They were 12-16 last season. They were 22-5 this season, and could warrant in that large bid in the in the national tournament. You had Elizabeth City State, who were the runner-ups, who got incredible tournament performances from Rashana Grant and Naija Blanco. Naija Blanco was just knocking them down from three. She hit 8 threes in her last 2 tournament games, shot about 36% from the three-point range in the last 2 tournament games. And Rashana Grant was a monster on the boards in that championship games. Had 13 boards, 11 offensive rebounds in that game. She had 6 offensive rebounds in just the first quarter. So that just tells you how dominant she was. And Elizabeth City State in any other year would have been probably would have walked away with the crown. But this year was all about Fayetteville State. And Anala Bryant, she proved why she is the CIAA Player of the Year. She had an incredible semifinal performance. She was perfect from the field, hit all 11 of her shots, hit 5 from 3, had 31 points in that game, and didn't have a great shooting performance in the championship game, but she proved her worth in turn on the defensive end. Had a big steal down the stretch that led to a foul that hit some big free throws down the stretch that helped secure her team to win. Fayetteville State, their coach Tyrese Brown talked about them potentially hosting a region in the D2 tournament, and they would be worthy. They are 27-2 overall heading into the tournament, have not lost a conference game haven't lost a game in general since they lost to Johnson C. Smith. And as Coach Brown mentioned during the press conference, when I asked him about his outlook on potentially being selected to the D2, well, not potentially, they're in the D2 tournament, but in terms of what seeding they could potentially get, he said that they would warrant hosting a region because their 2 losses, one of them they lost on a buzzer beater to a regionally ranked team, and the other one, Johnson C. Smith, he said they had the flu in that one, so they were missing some players. So they have the strength of schedule. They've beaten teams that are regionally and nationally ranked, and I'm excited about the prospect of Fayetteville State potentially becoming the first women's team to win a tournament game in some years now. And dare I say they could potentially become like that Shaw in 2012 team and potentially make a run and maybe even win it. So I'm excited to see what Fayetteville State does in a women's tournament. Now the men's tournament, it was a more of the same, just a lot of exciting action. Lincoln winning their first ever tournament championship. There was a little discrepancy. There was people saying that this is their first since 1948. Just to clear that up, that was when West Virginia State. I don't know what the research error was, but this is actually technically their second overall CIAA championship, and this is their first tournament championship. The CIAA tournament was established, I believe, in the 70s or something like that. So this is their first time winning the tournament. But in 1915, they shared a share of the CIAA championship, the conference championship with Howard and Hampton. But enough of all that boring history. Let's get into the actual tournament. Fayetteville State, they stopped Fayetteville State from completing the sweep. That was a big moment down the stretch where Peter Sorber, who was named the tournament MVP, had a big block that all but sealed the win for Lincoln. The game situation was they had lost the ball after recovering a rebound, and one of the players from Fayetteville State picked it up, and then Sorber just soared through the lane for the block. If had that shot gone in that Fayetteville attempted, and had he not blocked it, it would have been a 3-point game, with about a little less than a minute to go. So he got that block, and they fouled him, and then he went down and hit a big free throw to bring the lead back up to 6. So Lincoln, looking forward to making it to the national tournament. They'll more than likely be an 8 seed, and look to play spoiler, but there was a lot of great basketball played this weekend, and I'm looking forward to see how these teams play out in the national tournament.
Yeah, the story for me in the tournament, both on the combined, was performance of Bluefield State, a relatively unheralded program. They came in and wrecked shop. They upset Winston-Salem State, which was one of their big time wins of the tournament. That's just a program overall for all sports that's got a lot of momentum right now. Their football team returned a few years ago, and they made a run last season. And they're only going to get better now. Their basketball team made a run in the CIAA tournament, which is notoriously difficult to win, especially for a young program like that. So to watch them play and to watch the enthusiasm they played with and the lack of fear that they played with was really exciting to see. And like the future is bright for that ball club. Now, Jarrett, you mentioned Fayetteville State on the women's side could potentially host a game in the tournament coming up here very shortly. Why do you think they should be able to do that?
Well, there's a difference between hosting a game and hosting a region. You know, they were 27-2. They had I forget the teams that they actually beat, but they have I believe 2 wins against teams who are nationally or regionally. I know one of them was Augusta. They were 24th overall and nationally when they beat them. And then there's another team that is currently regionally ranked as of, well, technically as of prior to the start of the CIAA tournament this past week. But their non-conference schedule is solid. You know, they only had one non-conference loss in, I believe, 13 games. And, you know, they coasted through their conference schedule. They had one hiccup against Johnson C. Smith, but I believe that their strength of schedule is something that warrants them at least getting mentioned as for potentially hosting the region. Now, will they host a region? That remains to be seen. There's still some conference tournaments that are coming up. They were ranked 3rd in the region heading into the CIAA tournament. Haven't seen the most recent update of the Atlantic region so to see where they are at this moment, but I know they were 3rd heading into the CIAA tournament. So the 2 teams ahead of them happen to lose in their conference tournament. There's a chance that they could potentially move up into that number 1 spot and claim that number 1 seed and host the region. So I definitely think they have the talent to do it. I definitely think they have the strength of schedule to do it, the key wins to be able to do it. It's all up to the selection committee at this point.
Yeah, we know how selection committees normally treat HBCUs when it comes to like seeding them or ranking them or however that goes. But hopefully Fayetteville State, Jarrett Hoffman laid it out. They have a very impressive resume. Not only did they kind of breeze through conference tournament play, they breezed through the regular season and had really good, strong victories in the non-conference play too. So recipe is there for them to host a region, especially considering some teams that were ranked ahead of them going into the CIAA tournament lost. So they should definitely be on that one line if all comes down to it. How do you forecast Lincoln on the men's side doing once Division II play starts? I know you said they're going to probably be HC going in. Not the best draw you can get, but they're in the tournament nonetheless. But how do you think they might fare?
I think that they're a very good defensive team. You know, Reggie Hudson, who was on the all-conference team, is an undersized guy, but he is fierce, a fierce competitor. Like I said, Peter Sorber is a guy that is a tremendous shot blocker, and they're guys that play as a team. They are together. There is no individuality about them. You know, after their semifinal win, you know, they were all in that press conference room. They packed themselves in that room and talked about how much they are a brotherhood and how intertwined they are together. You know, so they are a team that gets it. They are the very definition of what a team is, and they play like it, and they played like it throughout this tournament, and that's why they're tournament champions. The whether or not they're able to pull off an upset, I think that will hinge on their discipline. You know, as many teams were in that tournament, you know, they were very high turnover. You know, there was a lot of, you know, missed opportunities at the rim. There was a lot of, you know, inefficiency when it comes to scoring. So I think they'll need that clean. They'll need to clean that up heading into the tournament. But I think they have a very good chance to surprise somebody. If somebody comes in there sleeping on them, don't be surprised if they make it a good one.
Yeah, what struck me about Lincoln was their defense. I know they won a semifinal game by 2 points, and they needed a really strong defensive effort to do that. I think if you can, especially in college basketball, if you can hang your head on defense, um, I think any team can go far. I mean, like the offenses in Division 2 level aren't as potent as it is in maybe some other levels of Division 1 or Division 2 basketball, but I would say Lincoln has a really good chance to make some noise if they can just be a little bit more consistent on offense, like you said, Jarrett, and just continue to play really solid defense. I think they could go win a couple games in the tournament and kind of surprise some people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And another thing is like there's a lot. There was too many games where there's more turnovers than assists. Like we need to, work. There's too many gamble. There's too many gambling. Too much gambling on the play. Too many, cross court passes. There's too many outlet passes that weren't there. If it ain't clear and it's not the right basketball play, as they say, then don't make it. There's too many times where guys are trying to be the hero or make this big Sports Center top 10 caliber play like that. That's not going to fly when you play the top teams that are nationally ranked and trying to go for an upset like that. You got to clean those plays up, and I think if they do that, they will be able to win. They will be able to make some games interesting, if not get a win, because they are, like I said, they're very good defensively. Got a lot of stops down the stretch of the championship game, a lot of stops in their tournament games in general, but in the championship game especially, their defense was shining in that game. Like I said, Peter Sorber had arguably the best defensive play in all of the tournament with that block in the
The
final
block,
minute.
yeah.
So I think they just need to clean up the efficiency, and I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, like tournament basketball kind of reveals a lot about your team, especially like their composure, their maturity, and be able to handle pressure. That's what tournament ball is all about. Like how well do you handle pressure? How few mistakes you can make, and just like you said, Jared, just like calm down with like the over aggressiveness. It's okay to be aggressive, but like pick your spots when to take those chances. And so like if they can cut down on that, they can be a team that can make a run in the tournament. And speaking of tournament basketball, it just keeps rolling on. We got the SIAC tournament going on right now, men's and women's tournament. My favorite from the men's side is going to be Clark Atlanta. I know they went on that long winning streak about a month ago. They got snapped by Shaw, I believe it was. That kind of that limit that stopped that streak. But Jared, how do you handicap the SIAC field?
No, I'm with you. I think Clark Atlanta is definitely the class of the SIAC on the men's side. To be clear, they the class of the SIAC. They've been the best team all year. I believe they have like a 14 game winning streak or something like that. Some at one point throughout the season. So I think they're definitely the team to beat. I think if there's one team that could potentially give them a struggle, it's gonna be Morehouse. I think Morehouse is the next best team in the SIAC that could potentially give them some run. uh, I'm excited to see who comes through as that upset minded team. That's what I'm looking for. Everyone is talking about Clark Atlanta right now. Everybody's talking about Morehouse as being the next best team. I'm interested to see who, if it's Benedict, if it's Savannah State, if it's going to be Lemoyne Owen. Who is it going to be that says, I'm tired of people not talking about us and everybody's counted us out? I want to go in there and pull off an upset. Who's going to be that Bluefield State for on this side of the bracket?
I mean, it could very well be Fort Valley State. I mean, they're number two. They're number two seed in the bracket. They can make a run. I mean, we didn't even mention Miles. They're a very very dangerous ball club. They could wipe out everybody the way they play basketball. So while we both think Clark Atlanta is going to be the favorite, there's some other teams lurking there too that could give them a lot of problems. And so, like, I know winning that SIAC isn't the same as going through the gauntlet it is a CIAA, but like it's still a strong basketball conference. I know you and Chris Stevens, you very high on SIAC sports in general. When you guys think that, like that league it's one of the toughest leagues in all of Black college sports to begin with. So whoever wins this tournament on the men's side definitely going to earn it. So what do you think about the women's side, Jarrett?
Well, on the women's side, I'm interested to see who is going to set themselves apart. There's a lot of teams that had some so-so regular seasons from the SIAC. The Savannah State was who is hosting the tournament. By the way, they were the best team in the East. There's a couple of teams that Kentucky State and Miles who finished 15-4 in conference play. So, but I feel like this. I don't think that there's a clear favorite. I don't think there's a clear favorite on the women's side. I think that it is completely up for grabs. I would not be surprised if we saw a couple of upsets. I'm really interested to see who sets themselves apart from the pack. I think Savannah State, you'd have to say that they are probably the favorite because they're hosting it. So they have home field advantage. So home court advantage, excuse me. So we'll see if anybody can be upset minded in this tournament. Kendrick, you with me? Oh man, they got Kendrick. They got Kendrick again.
I know it got me again 2 weeks in a row. You were mentioning Savannah State being the favorite because they got home court advantage. I mean, like that probably could be like the deciding factor in a bracket that's kind of so close as we kind of mentioned before. Savannah State, they are a very good team. Kentucky State, as we mentioned before, they are the number one seed. Miles on the women's side too. They went 15-4 in conference play. So a lot of teams are kind of like at the top, or at least kind of bunched up in their way, where it could be decided by anybody. So I don't know if there's going to be as many upsets as there was in the CIAA tournament. It may be a little bit of chalk going on in the SIAC. So it's definitely going to be an exciting tournament all the way around, nonetheless.
Absolutely.
Yeah, basketball action going on right now in the SWAC. I'm looking at the men's side first. The women's side over Jackson State. Clinched the SWAC regular season championship for the 5th year in a row. They currently are 15-0. And they're going to be obviously number one seed when the SWAC tournament starts pretty soon here. But on the men's side, a lot of games of importance as the standings at the top are pretty bunched up. Grambling State, they lead the way. They're the defending regular season champions. They have a 12-3 record. Texas Southern is a game and a half behind them at 11-5. The Tigers always make their patented late season run. They're doing it again. They've won 4 in a row. Southern, which was in first place for a very long time in the SWAC, in the SWAC, they are in 3rd place, tied with Alcorn State, who's won 6 straight games. They've been surging. Bethune-Cookman, surprising, they are only 2.5 games out of first place heading into tonight. And Alcorn State plays as a Southern, and Bethune-Cookman playing Grambling. So, and Florida A&M playing Southern. So 3 games on the slate tonight is going to have a lot to say about positioning in the SWAC basketball standings. Jarrett, of the group of teams at the top that I mentioned, which one you think currently has the inside track right now between Grambling, Texas Southern, and Southern and Alcorn?
I think Texas Southern because they've been there. They've been there. They know what it takes. They know what to do. I'm interested to see the result of this Texas Southern Alcorn State game. Alcorn State, they were the regular season champion last year. They got knocked off by Texas Southern. So heading into the tournament, this is a chance for them to make a statement and to, get a big win on the road against the team that beat them and that claimed the conference last year from them. So, but if I'm betting on anybody, of course, I'm going to bet on the team that has been there and that has done it for years. They've been doing it for years.
Yeah, me too. Texas Southern, they're always dangerous. I mean, they get off to a slow start non-conference play, even in regular season SWAC play. And then, like, once the calendar turns to the new year, that's when they turn it on. They have done the same thing this year. But I think we got to respect Grambling, too. They were the defending regular season champions last year, and they're in first place as it stands right now in early March. So right now, they're kind of like my favorite. If Texas Southern doesn't overtake them to win the SWAC, Southern for a very long time they were in first place, as I mentioned before. Then they kind of fell off here the last couple of weeks, but they could bounce back. But it's going to be tough to overcome the zombies that are Texas Southern. They will just continue to battle and continue to fight, and regardless of what happens, what their record is, they're going to be in it to the end. And these last few weeks of the regular season are going to tell the tale, like who comes out the top. But I think Grambling State, with the way they score the ball, with the way they play defense, I think they're going to hang on to that SWAC regular season championship and win it for the second year in a row. I mentioned the women's side for the SWAC, which has been decided at the state once again, 5-time SWAC women's champions for the fifth year in a row. They beat Texas Southern last time by about 50 points to cement their regular season championship. Our good buddy Brandon wrote a story today saying that Jackson State received votes in the women's AP Top 25 poll. They were the only HBCU to do that. So if the poll had been expanded to maybe 30 teams, Jackson State would be among the top 30 in the country. And our good friend Live for Hoop, she tweeted, the great basketball expert that everybody references that we wrote about earlier this year. She thought that Jackson State should get a seed above a 15 seed. As you know, Jarrett, black colleges come tournament time, they're normally slotted in that 15, 16 seed range. They're normally in the play-in game, or the first four as they call it. But Liv, she thinks that Jackson State deserves a higher seed than a 15. That they deserve maybe a 14 or a 13 seed, based on their resume and how they dominated the SWAC. Jarrett, what say you?
So shout out to Live for Hoops. We had a interesting discussion, a constructive discussion about, what seed Jackson State could potentially be in if they of course they got to win the conference first, so the conference tournament first. But what I pointed out about what seed they could potentially get, in 2022, Jackson State was perfect in their conference as well. They were 18-0. But they got the 14 seed mainly because they were 2-7 in conference play. You look at them this season; they're I believe in 3-6 or something like that in conference play. And I think two of those wins came against Tougaloo and Lemoyne. Well, actually, I have it right here. They beat Lemoyne-Owen, they beat Tougaloo, and they beat University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez, which none of those are Division I teams. The only Division I non-conference wins they have are against Southeastern Louisiana. So when you look
and they got that win against St. John's too.
Oh yeah, St. John's too.
Yeah,
St. John's too. Right. So when you look at the non-conference schedule, yes, they're 18-0, but they only have 2 wins against non-conference Division I opponents. Like, if you ask me, I would have them as a 13 seed. I think the dominance that they have displayed, the margin of victory that they have, over their conference opponents, the fact that they have a win against a credible opponent like St. John's, the fact that they have played teams like Kansas State, Oregon State, they played Mississippi State, Miami, they played these Power 5 teams. So it's not like they've played against these mid-majors that nobody's ever heard of until they make this magical tournament run. No, they're playing against the top competition, but if I'm looking at it realistically, this schedule completely mirrors their schedule from 2022. They were 2-7 in conference play. They were 18-0 against they were 18-0 against conference, 2-7 non-conference. So just by looking at that lets me know that they probably aren't going to get something like they probably aren't going to get a 13 or a 12 that they may warrant. I think it's more likely that they probably get a 14. I hope they're not shortchanged. They get a 15 or a 16. I don't think that's going to happen. And really, I think 14 will be shortchanging them.
Yeah. Maybe, this year, like, the committee sometimes holds your performance from the previous years against you. Last season, Jackson State, they rolled through the SWAC again in the regular season. Then they lost in the semifinal to Southern on the buzzer beater. And then they go to the NIT, and then they lose in the NIT to Memphis. So maybe the committee might think, well, like Jackson State got to prove it to us that they can like go through the regular season again, play a tougher schedule, beat some teams, and then see where they're at the end of the day. But Jackson State only can play who they play. They can control that. But the committee, they do look at your quad one wins, which is like the top 25 or 30 teams in the country. And they look at the quad two wins, which is the level below that. And then there's quad 3 wins and quad 4 wins, which are teams kind of like 75 to like 100. And so Jackson State, they don't have like a quad 1 win against a quality opponent, but the St. John's win is their lone best win of the non-conference play, at least. So that could give them a boost over another mid-major who may have a similar resume to them. But Jackson State has proven over the last 5 to 6 years, like they are one of the best mid-majors in the country. And so they gave LSU a game over the last time they were in the tournament. They almost beat them. It's the same LSU team that won the championship last season. They almost beat them at LSU. So this team can play with anybody in the country, and they kind of show that they have the last few years. So I think whatever seed they get, it will be a seed I think Jackson State can work with. But for my money, I think Jackson State deserves to be in that kind of like 13, 14 seed range. I don't think they're a playing team at all. If the committee does that, that's a slap in the face to everybody.
Absolute
If that happens.
That's a
Yeah.
slap in the face. That's spitting in the face. That's any disrespect that you could possibly give. Look, I think the one way that teams can get the respect of the committee, somebody's got to go on a run. Somebody has to be that Florida Gulf Coast. Somebody has to be that George Mason and make it at least to the Sweet 16. That it hasn't happened yet. Norfolk State on the men's side won a game. Hampton on the men's side won a game in 2001. You had I'm trying to think. Alcorn State, made it to the round of 32 back in the 80s, I believe, but nobody has made it to that Sweet 16. As soon as we get a team in the Sweet 16 or maybe even the Elite 8, then we'll start getting that respect. But we haven't had anybody that, especially on the women's side, that has bucked the system. I don't even think that a women's team has been to the round of 32, if I'm not mistaken, unless it was Hampton, I believe, that won a game on the women's side. Could be wrong.
Hampton won their first 4 game last year, to get to play the number 1 seed in the tournament last year.
But I'm talking about like getting to the round of 32. Just that's just to get to the round of 64. So like I think in terms of like getting that respect from the committee, we need to have a big run. Like we need to have a team make it to the round of 32 or the Sweet 16, if not the Elite 8. Like if we can get a team to the Sweet 16, that would be huge in terms of putting the committee on notice that we have talent here and we have the capability of making that big run, but you just got to give us a chance. You got to level with us. We have the record to warrant a 13, 14 seed, a 12 seed. We have the record to knock off potentially an ACC team that probably didn't win their conference tournament, or a Big East team or a Big 12 team that didn't win their conference tournament. You just got to give us a chance. And I think Jackson State and a team that we're probably going to get into in a second could potentially do that.
Yeah, on the women's side, it's kind of hard to make those Cinderella runs because the disparity in teams is so great, from South Carolina to the 68 team. Like you rarely ever see any upsets, especially early in the tournament. Now you may see them as like you get to the round of 16 and Elite 8, things of that nature. But like the early rounds of the tournament, it's very difficult to see any upsets happening. So like for a Jackson State or Norfolk State, who is also a team in the MEAC that probably also deserves not to be a 16 seed either, based on the way they played this season. They're another ball club that could possibly state their case saying like we're better than what you think an HBCU is. And so, Jarrett, you think like Norfolk State had the same argument as Jackson State to say like, hey, like we don't need to be in the play-in tournament, we don't need to be a 16 seed?
So this is what me and again, shout out to Live for Hoops, and shout out to the the Jackson State girl on Twitter. I forget her name.
Oh, she loves D. Yeah, she's
She loves
really
D.
knowledgeable
Yeah,
about
I had a
basketball and everything else too.
had a very constructive conversation with them about, you know, who deserves a better seeding between Norfolk State and Jackson State. And my thing was, Jackson State has an 11-4 record against non-conference opponents, and those wins are against William and Mary, a credible mid-major team, Drexel, who I believe has a winning record, Radford, Appalachian State has a winning record, Hampton, Colgate, Chicago State, they High Point, UNC Wilmington. These are credible schools. Longwood. These are credible schools that are incredible conferences on par with Norfolk State. You know, and Jackson State, their non-conference wins are, like I said, 2 are against D2 teams, 1 is against the NAIA team. You know, so my thought was, you know, you got a Norfolk State team that has a better non-conference record that's going to look better to the selection committee. Now, obviously, yes, Jackson State is undefeated in conference play, but you look at the overall records of the teams that Jackson State has beaten in conference, it's not as impressive. You know, I mean, it's solid. You know, they beaten UAPB, they beaten Southern, they beaten Grambling, they beaten Alabama A&M. But I don't think that's enough to put them over the top compared to a Norfolk State team who has beaten non-conference teams with winning records. So I think one thing that we can all agree on, that 14-16 is a slap in the face to either one of them. It's a slap in the face to either one of them. Either one of them is good enough to be in that 12 or 11 seed at best, maybe even a 10 seed, you know, and get an upset win in a round of 64 game and potentially even make it to the Sweet 16. But if you ask me, who I have more faith in to potentially win a tournament game, I would have to say Norfolk State. And the reason why is that they do it by committee. Remember, the first 11 games or the first 10 games, they didn't have Diamond Johnson. In this game that they just won today, Kiera Wheeler was 1 for 13 from the field, only had 3 points. So that showed you that they do it by committee. They're not, it may look individually when you look at it on a stat sheet, but every player out on the court for Norfolk State makes winning plays. And when you talk about tournament play, that favors more than a Jackson State team who has struggled against the top teams. Now, granted, Norfolk State doesn't have a great record against the Power 5 teams. They lost to Minnesota. They lost to who was it? Auburn. Earlier this season, they got blown out by both of those teams. So they don't exactly have the track record of Jackson State, who has a Power 5 win to their credit. But when you look at it from an overall sense, Norfolk State's resume looks better to the selection committee than Jackson State, even though they are undefeated in conference. But I reserve the right to be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. So maybe I'm weighing these mid-major wins for Norfolk State more than I should be. But to me, 11-4 in conference play looks a lot better than 2-6 against Division I opponents.
It's funny you mentioned that because Commissioner McClellan for the SWAC, he's also head of the Division I men's basketball committee, and he was asked last year at the SWAC tournament, kind of around this time, like, what will it take for the SWAC to get more than one team in the tournament? And he mentioned specifically winning your non-conference games. It don't matter how many you win, just win them. And winning those games, no matter if it's against fellow mid-majors or blue bloods, matters a whole lot to the committee because they take that into account when determining seeding and where teams go. And so I know some people may say, well, Jackson State may be more superior team because their body of work over the last several years. But you mentioned something, Jarrett, like despite the fact that maybe Norfolk State didn't play like the same Power 5 schools that Jackson State did, they won the bulk of their mid-major games. And so the committee is going to sit there and say, hey, like this is a team that played a variety of opponents and they beat them. And so they obviously a tournament worthy team. Now, whether are seeded remains to be seen, but like they might get a better seeding simply because they just simply won more non-conference games than Jackson State did.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to scheduling. You know, I'm not gonna show my ignorance about, you know, how scheduling works and stuff like that. But I think if we get those Power 5 teams, if we get I know USC isn't really attainable, but LSU, you know, they're in the region with Jackson State. You know, that's not in terms of travel, that wouldn't be as difficult. You know, if you get a team like who's somebody in the general region, if you get a Georgia, if you get an Alabama, if you get those teams on your schedule, a Texas, University of Texas, if you get a Texas Tech, you know, who is also in that region. If you get those teams to play against you, if you're Norfolk State, if you can get a University of Maryland, if you can get a University of Virginia, if you can get a who else, Virginia Tech, you know, who on your schedule, that's big for you. And not only getting them on your schedule, but winning against them. Like a committee is not going to respect making a game competitive. They are going to respect wins. We don't play this game to be competitive with the top teams. We play this game to beat the top teams, and that's the only thing they are going to respect. So we can say all we want. Oh, Jackson State had this team on their schedule. They had this team on their schedule. If they didn't win it, it doesn't matter. And they only won one of those games. So we can only take one of those games into account. Whereas Norfolk State, we are admitting they only had what, 3 Power 5 teams. They had Minnesota, they had Wake Forest, and one more team that's escaping me that they played that was P5. Or maybe those are the only 2. But they had those P5s on their schedule. They lost them, but they had the mid-majors to back them up. They had the mid-major wins to back them up. And those are teams that one of them, I believe, they have a 19-10 record. I believe it's Colgate that they beat, that has the 19-10 record. I could be wrong about that, but you play to win the game. And if I'm looking at a team that has what, 4 or 5, 6 mid-major wins, and one who has a P5 win, and every other win is against a NAIA or a D2 team, I'm going to look at that team with the more mid-major wins. People may have different philosophies than me, but I'm just going by how I see it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it all shakes out. I mean, Jackson State and Norfolk State, they're both 2 worthy teams to be in the tournament. Number 1. Number 2, they could make some noise because they're so talented. But Jarrett, you got the last word on that one. Thanks for watching us tonight, folks. I'm Kendrick. That's Jarrett Hoffman. Please follow us on social media, on Twitter, X, on Instagram, and on Facebook, and our YouTube channel too, so you can get more videos like this. And we will see you guys next time.